Okay, at 11:47, one of our patrol officers called in to dispatch smoke coming out from, I can't believe it's yogurt. Fire department got here shortly thereafter. What we found in the back there was we found 4 victims. We're handling it as a homicide right now because it appears that one of the victims was struck in the head.
Amy Ayers was 13 years old. That is where this story begins. Not with the fire, not with the crime scene, not with the 4 girls found in the back of a burning yogurt shop on a Friday night in December 1991. It begins with one girl. The youngest one. The one who was only there because she was waiting for a ride home. Amy Ayers was 13 years old. And in her final moments in the back of that burning building, she fought back. She scratched her attacker hard enough to trap his skin cells under her fingernails. She was terrified. She was in pain. She was 13 years old, and she fought anyway. The medical examiner documented it during the autopsy. That DNA sat in a laboratory for 34 years. Through the fire that destroyed almost every other piece of evidence in the building. Through the wrongful convictions of 4 innocent men. Through the death of one of them. Through 3 decades of silence and cold case files, and a city that never stopped asking a question nobody could answer. In June 2025, a cold case detective named Dan Jackson submitted that DNA to a laboratory in South Carolina. The match came back at 2.5 million to 1. His name was Robert Eugene Brashears. He had been dead for 26 years. Amy had always known who he was. She left his name under her fingernails in 1991. It took the world 34 years to learn how to read it. This is how she said it loud enough for everyone to finally hear. Jennifer Harbison was 17 years old. She worked the closing shift at I Can't Believe It's Yogurt, a small frozen yogurt shop on West Anderson Lane on the north side of Austin, Texas. Friday nights, she would be there with her coworker and close friend Eliza Thomas, also 17. They were high school kids pulling a weekend job, earning, spending money, doing what teenagers in Austin did in 1991. The shop sat in a strip mall near North Cross Mall. Busy area, well lit. The kind of location parents did not think twice about sending their daughters to work a closing shift. Austin, in 1991, was not the city. It would eventually become no tech industry yet, no sprawl, maybe 500,000 people. A college town, laid back, the kind of place that felt safe in the particular way that mid-sized American cities felt safe before something happened to change that feeling permanently. On the evening of December 6th, Jennifer's younger sister Sarah came to the shop to wait for a ride home. Sarah was 15. She brought her friend Amy Ayers with her. Amy was 13. They were not working. They were not customers. They were just there, killing time until Jennifer closed up around 11, at which point everyone would pile into the car and the evening would end the way 1,000 ordinary Friday evenings ended. Amy was the youngest person in that building. Her brother Sean was 19 at the time. When he talked about his sister in the years that followed, the word that kept coming up was fighter. She didn't back down from anything. She was stubborn and physical and unafraid in the way that 1, 3-year-olds can be when they haven't yet learned to be careful about those things. She was there for a ride home. She was not supposed to be part of anything that happened next. Shortly before midnight, a patrol officer driving down West Anderson Lane noticed flames inside the shop. Fire crews responded. When the blaze was under control and they reached the back of the building, they found all 4 girls. The first detective on scene was John Jones. He had worked Austin homicide for years. He would describe what he saw that night as wholesale carnage. All 4 had been bound and gagged and shot in the head. 2 different guns had been used. At least one of the girls had been sexually assaulted. The shop had been doused with accelerant and set on fire, a deliberate, methodical attempt to burn away everything that had happened inside it. It mostly worked. The fire destroyed most of the physical evidence in the building. Then the sprinkler system kicked in and damaged what the fire had not reached. Between the two, investigators had almost nothing to work with. Almost nothing. 2 things survived. A. 380 shell casing from one of the guns that had rolled into a floor drain before the fire reached it. And from beneath the fingernails of Amy Ayers, the 3-year-old who was only there for a ride home, investigators recovered DNA, skin cells, from someone who was not her. She had fought her attacker hard enough to scratch him and trap his cells under her nails. The medical examiner documented it during the autopsy and sealed it in an evidence bag. In 1991, neither piece of evidence could do what investigators needed it to do. The shell casing had no database to check against. The federal ballistics matching system that compares the unique marks a gun leaves on a casing against casings from other crimes across the country did not exist yet. The DNA from Amy's fingernails could not be fully profiled with the technology they had. Both were logged, sealed, and placed in storage. The city of Austin had 4 dead teenagers in a strip mall yogurt shop. A mayor who would say years later that the murders haunted Austin's soul. Thousands of tips. A task force. 50 confessions over the years from attention seekers and inmates and people who were simply unwell. 2 men arrested by Mexican authorities on a confession that fell apart within weeks. A serial killer named Kenneth McDuff active in Central Texas at the time and known for targeting young women, investigated thoroughly and ruled out. On the day of his own execution in 1998, McDuff confessed to the yogurt shop murders. It was not him either. Every time Austin thought the case was about to break, it did not. Detective John Jones refused to sign off on any of it. Every time someone tried to close the case on a confession alone, he pushed back. The same question every time. Where's the physical evidence? Where's the gun? Where's the DNA? He wanted proof or nothing. That position eventually got him transferred out of homicide. He packed his desk and moved to another unit. The city moved on. He was right about everything. Not one of those confessions could be supported by a single piece of physical evidence. Not one. But in 1991, that proof was already sitting in a storage facility, in 2 sealed bags, a shell casing in a drain, and a dead girl's fingernails, waiting for a world that was not yet ready to hear what they were, saying, by 1999, the case was frozen. 8 years, no suspect, no physical evidence leading anywhere, no confession that held together under scrutiny. A new task force went back through everything and landed on 4 young men. Shortly after the murders in 1991, one of them, a teenager named Maurice Pierce, had been arrested near North Cross Mall carrying a .22 revolver. During that arrest, he had told police that a friend named Forrest Wellborn had used a gun in the yogurt shop and told him about it. That thread sat dormant for years. When the task force pulled it back out in 1999, it pulled in 2 more names, Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. All 4 knew each other. All 4 had been teenagers in 1991. By 1999, they were in their mid-20s. Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott were interrogated over multiple days. In Scott's case, the session stretched past 12 hours. Critical portions were not recorded. There was no way to know what detectives said to them during those gaps. When the sessions were over, both men had given statements that were inconsistent with each other on basic details, who did what, who was where, who had which gun. But both had said enough to implicate themselves and each other. Pierce was held in the county jail for 3 years, waiting for a trial that kept being delayed. 3 years locked up, waiting. Wellborn was charged. 2 separate grand juries looked at the case against him and refused to indict. Springsteen was tried, convicted of capital murder, and sentenced to death. He was 25 years old when the jury decided he should be executed. Scott was convicted and sentenced to life without parole. His wife had a 3-year-old daughter at home. Here is how the jury reached those verdicts. They knew the DNA from the crime scene did not match any of the 4 defendants. The prosecution acknowledged it in open court, but then they told the jury it did not matter. This was a robbery, not a sexual assault, they said. The DNA came from some unrelated encounter. The person who left it had nothing to do with the murders. The jury bought it. For several years, Austin believed the case was closed. Then more advanced testing changed everything. The blood and the semen from the crime scene came from the same person, one man, which meant this was a sexual assault, which meant the DNA the prosecution had dismissed as unrelated was in fact the killer's DNA, and that DNA excluded all 4 defendants completely. Springsteen, Scott, Pierce, Wellborn, none of them matched. The profile belonged to someone who was not in any database anywhere in the country. Whoever he was, he had either never been arrested or never been swabbed. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals threw out both convictions in 2006 and 2007. Springsteen and Scott were released in 2009. But released is not exonerated. The charges were dropped, but nobody stood in front of a camera and said these men are innocent. The suspicion stayed. For the next 16 years, all 4 lived as the yogurt shop suspects. Wellborn lost friends, could not hold a job, was homeless for a period. Scott's marriage ended. His daughter grew up without him. He said later, the conviction did not just take years from him, it took the life he was supposed to have. Springsteen spent a decade in prison, including time on death row. When he got out, he said he lived every day being treated like a monster. And Maurice Pierce, the youngest of the 4, the one who had been locked in a county jail for 3 years waiting for a trial that finally fell apart, never came close to recovering. In 2010, during a mental health crisis, he stabbed an Austin police officer and was shot dead. He was 30 years old. His daughter Marissa was still a child when her father died, carrying the suspicion of 4 murders he did not commit. After the convictions were thrown out, the case went cold again. The DNA profile from the crime scene was complete. A full genetic fingerprint of the man who killed those girls. It existed. It was sitting in a lab file, but it did not match anyone in any criminal database in the country. That is where the case sat for over a decade. Nobody actively worked it. The storage facility still held the 380 shell casing that had rolled into a floor drain in 1991. It still held the sealed evidence bag from Amy's autopsy, both waiting. Both unchanged. Both saying the same thing they had always been saying to anyone with the technology to hear it. On December 8, 1991, 2 days after 4 teenage girls were found murdered in an Austin yogurt shop, a man was stopped at a Border Patrol checkpoint on Interstate 10 in West Texas. He was driving a truck stolen from Georgia. He had a .380 caliber AMT backup pistol on him, same make and model used to kill at least one of the girls in that shop 500 miles to the east. The agents at the checkpoint had no idea what they were holding. The Austin detectives working the biggest case in the city's history had no idea he existed. He was arrested on the auto theft charge. The gun was confiscated by federal authorities. The ballistics were never run against any open homicide cases. There was no shared system in 1991 that would have connected a drifter stopped in the West Texas desert to 4 dead teenagers in a strip mall on the north side of Austin. He drove through the system on a theft charge and disappeared. His name was Robert Eugene Brashears. He was a drifter from Virginia, raised in Alabama, who spent his adult life moving through the South and Midwest, doing construction work and odd labor. He had one prior violent conviction, attempted murder in Florida in the mid-1980s, where he had attacked a woman in her home. He served approximately 3 years of a 12-year sentence before making parole. After that, he never settled anywhere, got married, had a daughter, adopted 2 stepdaughters, and kept moving. His method never changed. Break in, find the victims, sexual assault, a firearm. He moved constantly and never hit the same area twice. Every crime sat in a different state, with a different police department and a different set of files. None of it was connected while he was alive, because connecting it required a level of cross-state communication and database integration that simply did not exist in the 1990s. A 28-year-old woman named Genevieve Zitricki was raped and strangled in her apartment in Greenville, South Carolina in 1990. After killing her, the man had dragged her body into the bathtub and written a message on the bathroom mirror. That case went cold for decades. A 14-year-old girl in Memphis in 1997. A man with a revolver forced his way into her home and tied up 4 people before assaulting her. A mother and her 12-year-old daughter in Portageville, Missouri in March 1998. Both tied up. The girl assaulted. Both shot dead. 2 hours after those murders, the same man crossed into Tennessee and forced his way into another home. A woman fought him off. He shot her in the arm and ran. At least 8 murders across 4 states over the course of a decade. The same man each time. No one knew. It was not until 2018, 19 years after Brashears was already dead, that a genetic genealogist named C.C. Moore at Parabon Nanolabs traced the South Carolina murder to a specific individual. His remains were exhumed from a cemetery in Arkansas, and the DNA from his bones confirmed the match. A partial picture of what Brashears had done began to form, but Austin was not part of it. Nobody had any reason to look at Texas. The connection that would bring it all together had not been made yet. Robert Brashears shot himself during a police standoff at a Super 8 motel in Kennett, Missouri in January 1999. Police had come about a stolen car in the parking lot and found him under the bed with a loaded gun. He opened fire. Then he grabbed his wife and 3 children and barricaded himself in the room. After 4 hours of negotiation, he let the family go. He put the gun to his head and pulled the trigger. He died 6 days later. He was 40 years old. Not one officer at that motel knew they were standing across from a man responsible for at least 8 murders in 4 states. He died looking like a man who had run out of road, not a man who had left DNA under a 13-year-old girl's fingernails 8 years earlier in a burning yogurt shop in Austin. And now the timing that makes everything worse. Brashears died in January 1999. That same year, the Austin Task Force was building its case against Robert Springsteen and Michael Scott. While detectives were constructing a prosecution that would send 2 innocent men to prison, the actual killer had already been in the ground for 9 months. The men who would eventually be convicted for his crimes were being interrogated while he was already gone. He had taken everything he knew with him. Everything except what Amy had already taken from him. Dan Jackson took over Austin PD's cold case unit in 2022. His supervisor brought him in on his first day, closed the door, and told him the yogurt shop murders were his assignment. Nobody had actively worked the case since the wrongful convictions fell apart. The file was thick. Decades of tips, false confessions, investigation reports, court documents, evidence logs. The DNA profile of the real killer sitting in a lab file for years matched to no one. Jackson dug in. He got shot in the line of duty during a separate case while he was working this one. He came back to his desk as soon as he was cleared. That detail matters not because it is dramatic, but because it tells you something specific about the kind of attention this case was receiving from the one person assigned to it. In June 2025, Jackson pulled the 380 shell casing from storage, the one that had rolled into the floor drain in 1991 before the fire reached it. He submitted it to a federal ballistics database that matches the unique marks a gun leaves on a casing against casings from other crimes across the country. Every gun is machined slightly differently. Every gun leaves a signature. The software had been upgraded substantially since the last time anyone had run this casing. Previous submissions had come back empty. This time the system returned a hit. The yogurt shop casing matched a casing from an unsolved 1998 murder in Kentucky. Same gun, different state, 7 years apart. The ballistics were pointing somewhere. At the same time, Jackson went after the DNA. He requested what is called a YSTR search, a way of comparing the male DNA profile from the Austin crime scene against male DNA profiles sitting in forensic labs across the country. Unlike a standard database search, this one had to be done by hand. Jackson was asking each lab individually to pull their records and check for a match. Most came back with partials, not enough. South Carolina came back with a full match, 27 out of 27 markers, to a profile from a 1990 murder case that had already been solved, to a man whose remains had been exhumed from a cemetery in Arkansas in 2018, to Robert Eugene Brashears. The ballistics and the DNA had come from completely different directions, different databases, different states, different crimes separated by years, and they were converging on the same person in the same week. Jackson ran the final confirmation against the DNA from under Amy Ayers' fingernails, the evidence that had been sitting in a storage facility since 1991, the cells that a 13-year-old girl had scratched from her attacker's skin in the back of a burning building when she was out of options and fighting anyway. The likelihood ratio came back at 2.5 million to 1. It was him. On September 29, 2025, Austin PD held the press conference the city had waited 34 years for. The families were there. John Jones, the detective who had been transferred out of homicide for demanding physical evidence before confessions, was there. He had come to see it end. Jackson stood at the podium and spoke to the families directly. He told them this could not have been solved any earlier. The technology and the cross-state connections simply did not exist until now. The shell casing, the YSTR search, the genealogical DNA work done on the South Carolina case in 2018. None of it was available in 1991. None of it was available when the wrongful convictions happened. The path to Brashears required tools that had not yet been built. Then he told them who had actually solved it. It was Amy's fighting back that solved this case. Amy's final moments on this earth were to solve this case for us. It is because of her fighting back. She was 13 years old. The DNA she raked from her killer's skin while fighting for her life in the back of that yogurt shop is what brought his name to the surface 34 years later. Her father told reporters he had never been so proud of her in his life. The family had always believed there was something about Amy that would help solve the case. Her brother Sean pinned one of the original "We Will Not Forget" buttons made by the victim's parents back in 1991 onto Jackson's lapel at the press conference. Eliza Thomas's sister Sonora stood at the same podium. She talked about the decades since, strangers in Austin who had stopped her over the years to say her family was in their prayers. Then she said something that stayed in the room long after the press conference ended. Their families are still too small. They are lesser for it. Robert Brashears had been dead for 26 years when his name was finally spoken in connection with the yogurt shop murders. Hit that like button, subscribe. If you are getting value from this video, don't forget to like and share it with someone you love. It might matter more than you think. February 19th, 2026, Travis County Courthouse, standing room only. The prosecutor stood up and told the judge that the state had prosecuted 4 innocent men for one of the worst crimes Austin had ever seen. She said, "The science and the confessions can't both be true. Brashears did this alone." Then she said it flat. "We could not have been more wrong." Springsteen's attorney read a written statement on his behalf. He had been persecuted every day since the arrest. He had lived every single day being treated like a monster for something he did not do. Scott was in the room. So was Wellborn. Springsteen could not bring himself back into a courtroom, not after what courtrooms had done to him. Maurice Pierce was not there. His daughter Marissa was... She was a child when her father was shot dead in 2010, carrying the suspicion of 4 murders he did not commit. She had grown up without him in a world that had already decided what kind of man he was before she was old enough to understand what that meant. She stood up in that room and looked at the judge and spoke directly to her father. "Daddy, you have your name back. The world finally hears what you were trying to say all along." Let that sentence sit. The judge declared all 4 men innocent. She called it an obligation to truth, to the rule of law, and to the dignity of the individual. 34 years, 4 innocent men, 1 dead, 3 surviving into a world that had spent decades treating them as monsters. And the man who actually did it had been dead since January 1999. This is the part of the story that is hardest to hold. The DNA under Amy's fingernails was collected in 1991. Fully profiled and matched to no one in the criminal databases. The YSTR technology that would have allowed Jackson's cross-state hand search existed in a meaningful form by the early 2000s. The genetic genealogy work that identified Brashears from the South Carolina case was completed in 2018. Between 2018 and 2025, the Brashears profile existed in a solved case file in South Carolina. The yogurt shop DNA sat in a file in Austin. Nobody had yet thought to compare them. Nobody had yet thought to check if the man whose DNA matched a 1990 South Carolina murder also matched a 1991 Texas murder. That comparison happened in 2025, 7 years after it could have happened, 16 years after the wrongful convictions were thrown out, 34 years after Amy left the evidence behind. There is no one person responsible for that gap. The labs were in different states with different jurisdictions and different databases. The connections required someone to think to ask a specific question that nobody had thought to ask. Jackson asked it in 2022, when he picked up a file that had been sitting cold for over a decade. Maurice Pierce was 13 years old in 1991, the same age as Amy. He had nothing to do with what happened in that building. He was a teenager in the wrong social circle at the wrong time. He spent 3 years in a county jail. He never recovered from it. He died at 30 while his daughter was still a child. Amy fought back and left evidence that took the world 34 years to use. Maurice trusted the system that was supposed to protect him, and the system failed him completely. Two 13-year-olds in the same story, the same age, both destroyed by what happened in that building. Only one of them is remembered the way she deserves to be. The moral question at the center of this story is not whether the system failed. It clearly did, multiple times, in multiple ways, with multiple people paying the cost. The question is what it means that Amy Ayers, a 13-year-old girl who was only at that yogurt shop to wait for a ride home, is the reason any of this was ever resolved at all. Not the task force, not the database, not the 30 years of investigation, not the technology that eventually existed to run the comparison. Amy. In the back of a burning building, with no way out and no reason to believe it would matter, she scratched hard enough that something of him stayed in the world. She could not have known what she was doing. She only knew that fighting was the right thing to do. She was right. At the press conference in September 2025, her father said he had never been so proud of her in his life. Her brother pinned a "We will not forget" button to the detective's lapel. The button was from 1991. The family had been wearing them for 34 years, through the investigations that went nowhere, through the wrongful convictions that gave them false closure before taking it away, through the cold case years when nobody worked the file and the evidence sat in storage waiting. Through all of it, the family believed there was something about Amy that would eventually matter. Her brother had said it for years. She was a fighter. She did not back down from anything. She was stubborn and physical and unafraid. She proved all of it in the back of a burning building at the age of 13. Return to the beginning. She fought back. She left his name under her fingernails in 1991, and she waited 34 years in the dark for the world to learn how to read it. She was right to fight. She was right to scratch. She was right about everything. The last thing Amy Ayers did was solve the case. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.